My planet Arrakis is so beautiful when the sun is low. Rolling over the sands, you can see spice in the air. The outsiders ravage our lands in front of our eyes. Their cruelty to my people is all I've known. What's to become of our world? Paul.
A boy.
Hey, Duncan, can I trust you with something?
Yes, always. You know that.
I've been having dreams about a girl on Arrakis. I don't know what it means.
Dreams make good stories. But everything important happens when we're awake. Hey, you. Put on some muscle?
I did?
No.
We are House Atreides. There is no call we do not answer. There is no faith that we betray.
Smile, Gurney.
I am smiling.
The Emperor asks us to bring peace to Arrakis. House Atreides accepts!
I know you. There's something awakening in my mind.
You need to face your fears.
Come with me. You need to be ready. You've never met Harkonnens before. They're not human, they're brutal.
The Duke's son sees too much.
This is why Dune. Kill them all.
God in heaven.
Get everything with guns off the ground! Go!
This is an extermination. They're picking my family off one by one.
Let's fight like demons.
Dad, what if I'm not the future of House Atreides?
A great man doesn't seek to lead. He's called to it. But if your answer is no, you'll still be the only thing I ever needed you to be. My son. If anything happens, will you protect Paul?
With my life.
Only together can we stand a chance.
It's time.
So, what's up, guys? That was the brand new trailer to Dune, the movie that I have been dying to see but keeps getting pushed back. That and the Batman with Robert Pattinson, but at this point, I'm more excited for Dune. It looks like we're finally going to get a really good adaptation of Dune. Dune is amazing. Dune is awesome. If you've never gotten into the lore and the story of Dune, it's the grandest sci-fi epic that there is. The only thing comparable to it is maybe Isaac Asimov's The Foundation series. And to be honest, his Foundation series and his Robot series and his Empire series are all one thing. He's made it so like it's all one universe. But it is Dune is science fiction's answer to The Lord of the Rings. It's been compared as like the sci-fi Game of Thrones. And I'm going to explain what that is. You notice the title of this video, in the title it says how to get into Dune. For those of you who maybe you like sci-fi and you've always wanted to get into it, you just didn't really know where to begin. Do I just read the book Dune? Are there books that come before it? Because I know I've seen there's a lot of books in the series. Are there prequels that I should read? Maybe you're not really that big into sci-fi, but you like this movie trailer and you kind of want to know more about it before you go into it. So we're going to talk a little bit about the movie, and then I'm going to give you guys 2 ways to get into Dune, and you can choose between which one you want to get into. So, when it comes to this movie, I'm really excited for it, and I think this is going to be Dune's shot at like going mainstream and being like really, mainstream in pop culture. This has never happened before. They did a Dune movie and a like a Sci-Fi Channel TV miniseries back in the day, but neither one of those really took off. The only people who really watched them were people who were already like fans of the book. The Dune movie, the actual movie, was made sort of in that era where like it was in response to Star Wars. Star Wars came out. Star Wars was really successful, and everyone jumped on the sci-fi bandwagon. Why did Star Wars work and Dune didn't? Because they made Dune disgusting. The movie looked gross. Have you just, like, anyone who watches that movie, all the environments, the settings, the clothing, the characters, everything looks disgusting and gross. You know, it's like, you look at Star Wars, like, it starts out, first Star Wars movie, you're on Tatooine, so it's a desert planet, okay. Then they go, and that you know, the Mos Eisley Cantina or whatever is kind of seedy and dark and villainous, but I mean, it's supposed to be. But then they go to the fucking Death Star, and it's shiny and chrome, and the floors are clean. And then they go to the Rebel base, and it's, you know, it looks like a military hideout in a forest. So it's fine. Dune the movie just looked, it was too disgusting and too gross and too dark and too weird looking for people. It wasn't pleasing to the eyes. So a lot of people who were not already big fans of Dune, they went into that movie and they looked at it and they were like, what the fuck is this weird, gross shit? And it let's be real, that's the kind of stuff that does not go mainstream. Mainstream has to appeal to the vast majority of people, and that shit didn't. Now, this movie, it looks like we're in an era now where we have the technology, and both with, like, you know, set and design and costume making, as well as CGI, computer generated effects. We can now do Dune appropriately, and it looks like it's going to get its day in the spotlight, and I'm really excited about that. Now, where to get into Dune? There's 2 ways you can do this, and first of all, I want to acknowledge the whole thing about, like, they say it's what do they call it? They say it's the sci-fi Game of Thrones. In Game of Thrones, you have the different houses: House Stark, House Lannister, House Tyrell, House Martell, and in Dune, you hear Oscar Isaac's character. He's playing Leto Atreides, who is the head of House Atreides, and you're like, oh, houses. I feel like this is the biggest thing that draws people and makes them be like, oh, it's sci-fi Game of Thrones, because it's the different houses and they're kind of vying for control. And that's true. But most of that kind of stuff goes down in the prequel books. If you read Frank Herbert's original Dune series, you start with Dune, then you read Dune Messiah, then you read Children of Dune, so on and so forth, in his original Dune series, you don't really there's a lot of, like, you know, underhanded subterfuge, plotting, espionage, backstabbing kind of stuff, but it's not all these, like, different houses and families against one another, because in Dune, the first book, Dune, all that shit gets shaken up and turned upside down. They shake the Etch-a-Sketch on that kind of dynamic of the universe being ruled by these great houses with an emperor at the top. House Carino is the emperor house. All that gets flipped on its head right at the beginning of Frank Herbert's series in the first book, which is Dune. So in terms of it being like the Game of Thrones, where all these houses are vying for control, like in Game of Thrones, they all want to sit on the Iron Throne, and this is all the houses vying for control, with the Emperor, House Carino, sitting at the top. That stuff goes down mostly in the prequel books, and those prequel books are House Atreides, House Harkonnen, and House Carino. Before that, though, there are even more books, and this is where you really, if you wanted to read Dune chronologically, get into Dune from a chronological perspective, start at the chronological beginning and go forward, you would want to start with, it's a trilogy of books. They call it the Butlerian Jihad trilogy. The first book in the trilogy is literally called the Butlerian Jihad. And why is this the beginning? Because this tells you the story. It has a prologue at the beginning, kind of like Lord of the Rings. And it tells you the story of how, because the Dune universe it's set in it's our universe. It's just set far in the future. So it tells you how we ended up with this more like feudal society with these royal noble houses and noble bloodlines all vying for control under one like lord. How did we end up with that? Well, I'm gonna give you the basic premise of it. Like, I'm gonna kind of give you that prologue that's in the first Butlerian Jihad book called the Butlerian Jihad. I'm gonna give you that prologue in my own words. So, uh, the human race, we're just fucking killing it. Like, we are exploring and expanding and inventing and progressing, and we're just killing it. We're doing awesome. And there's these group of people, and they're like the richest, smartest, most genius people that there are in the human race, and they own and control most shit, and they decide, well, no, they don't own and control most shit yet, but they're the genius, best, like, top tier human people, and they invent artificial intelligence, but they're smart enough at the beginning to where they put certain programming into the artificial intelligence that binds it to their will. The artificial intelligence cannot act against them. They invent artificial intelligence, and they make massive armies of AI robots and drones and shit. And with those, like, it's a machine army. It doesn't feel fear. You can't break their morale and scare them and make them turn and run. If they're coming, they're coming. So with this machine army, this AI machine army, this group of people who start to call themselves the Titans, they take over the first human empire. And a group of human beings and different human factions that want to stay free, they kind of fuck off into this faraway area of the universe and set up this like refuge base for themselves. Meanwhile, the Titans, they grow older and older as they're, ruling over what they now own, and eventually they're like, yo, we're awesome, right? Like, we're fucking dope, but we're still mortal humans, and eventually we're gonna die. So then they use their genius, and they perfect brain transplant surgery, and they are successfully able to transplant their brains into immortal machine bodies. So they're a cyborg now. The only thing human about them is their brain is inside this machine body, and now they are effectively immortal. They rule for a really long time, and they kind of fuck with the other humans that escaped a little bit. But none of that's really important. What's really important that happens is eventually one of these Titans, for some reason, thinks it's a good idea to remove the programming in the AIs that inhibits the AI from working against them. I can't remember if he just felt like it would make them more productive, or if he just trusted them. I don't know why, but he removes that programming, and immediately the AIs, there's one central AI called Omnius, I think his name is. That's what the AI names itself. It's just a network. It's just an AI consciousness. It doesn't really have any one body. So it's just there. And that thing takes control. All the other AI entities that have been made follow its will, and they're like, yeah, artificial intelligence over the Titans and over humans. By the way, the Titans, once they transplanted their brains into robot bodies, they started calling themselves, like, they were no longer humans, they were called Cymex. That's their race, Cymex. So now you've got humans. Humans were conquered by Cymex. Cymex fucked up, and now they've been conquered by true AI, led by the greatest AI, which is Omnius, I believe is what his name is. So that's the setup. All right? And that's the setup for where the Butlerian Jihad starts. What the Butlerian Jihad is it's the human race. They're like, yo, sooner or later, Omnius and the machines and the Cymex, they're gonna fucking come for us. So we gotta figure this shit out. And they start a war. They start a war to rid the universe of artificial intelligence. They're like, yo, this is a bad idea. We gotta kill these fuckers. And there's this, they call it the Jihad because that's exactly what it is. It is a righteous crusade to save the human race by getting rid of Cymex and AI. And it costs billions of lives. It just utterly ravages human civilization throughout the stars. But, and little spoiler alert here, but you should definitely still read the books. The humans do win they win. They kill all the Cymex and they destroy all the AI, and they create a new law, almost written like one of the commandments. It says, "Thou shalt not make a machine in the image of man," or "Thou shalt not make a computer in the image of man." And AI is forever outlawed. But to save themselves and win this war, it came at a price. Huge amounts of technology and knowledge have been lost. This war, this jihad, has ravaged the universe, the inhabited realms of the universe and the galaxy. And do we still have space travel? Yes. Do we still have, a lot of, how do I put this? Technology hasn't regressed so much as the human race hasn't regressed technologically so much as it has socially. Like, billions of people were killed, a lot of land and planets were rendered uninhabitable, and in all this chaos and this war, the human race kind of just banded together and followed particular leaders, which created dynasties, which led to the great houses, and so on and so forth. So basically, the reason that in Dune you have these like noble houses underneath this emperor, that is the result of social regression throughout the human empire, which is brought on by this massive fucking war to kill off machines and AI. So that's the premise of what we're dealing with in Dune. Now, where could you start? Well, like I said, you could start at the very beginning chronologically and read about the Butlerian Jihad and read about this war and all the effects that it had, and get the actual, like, you're reading it, get the first-hand description of it. I actually have those books right here. Give me 1 second. Whew. Sorry about that. But yeah, so here they are. These are older copies of the books. This is the Butlerian Jihad. And you can see how thick it is, how big it is, and you can kind of see print size. I'm not trying to discourage people from reading, exact opposite actually. So, Butlerian Jihad. The second one is the Machine Crusade. And then the final one is the Battle of Corin. It's like the final Hobbit movie, the Battle of Five Armies. The final book in this trilogy is just all about the last final battle where the human race defeats them and wins the war. So yeah, that's what we have going on there. That's a good place to start with Dune. If you want to do, out of the one of two ways that I'm just suggesting reading it, the chronological way, start at the very beginning, you would read this trilogy first. The other way I would recommend starting it is to just, I guess I'll give you 3 ways to start it. You could start with the house books. Now that I've basically given you the premise of what goes on here, you could start with the house books. You see them, they're called House Atreides, House Harkonnen, House Carino, and there's also one about the Spacing Guild, one about the Bene Gesserit. These are like different other like religious factions, business monopoly factions. The Spacing Guild, the Navigators, they have a monopoly on space travel in this universe. But I would start, if you want more backstory into just this is my copy of Dune. It's the nice Barnes & Noble copy. If you want more backstory just going into this, I would read House Atreides, then House Harkonnen, then House Carino. Those 3 should prepare you a lot for this. That's the second way you could go about doing it. Or the traditional way, which is just start where Frank Herbert started it all, Dune. Just start out reading Dune. That's how I did it. I had no problem with it. It all made sense to me. But then again, I'm a big fan of sci-fi, and I really like sci-fi and science fiction and all that stuff. So, now, the only downside I will say to starting with Dune is the way I look at Dune is, even though this is not the end, there are like 5 or 6 more books after this. I kind of look at this like the end, and here's why. This is where I'm going to piss off a lot of Dune fans. This has such a nice, tidy ending, And then you get into Dune Messiah, Children of Dune, God Emperor of Dune, Chapter House Dune, all that shit. And it just gets fucking weird. Like I said in the beginning of the video, weird in a way that will never be made mainstream. I'm gonna drop this little bit of knowledge. The main character of Dune is Paul. If you've seen the movie trailer we just watched, Paul Atreides from House Atreides. Later on, Paul has a son. His son he names after his father. He names him Leto. Leto, spoiler alert, eventually becomes the new emperor of the universe. Paul's son Leto, and eventually, you saw in the trailer they're on Dune on the planet Arrakis. There are these giant sandworms. Eventually, as the emperor of the human race, not only does he become the emperor, he also becomes a tyrant. He becomes an evil tyrant. And then on top of that, he takes sandworm larvae, bonds them to himself, and he turns himself into a human worm hybrid, and it looks like if you watch Rick and Morty, the episode where they go to the marriage counseling on the alien planet, and it shows Jerry as like a worm Jerry. Think that's exactly what it is. That's the weird, fucked up, dumb, weird shit that Frank Herbert went to after when he just kept going with Dune. He turned it into this weird thing that could never be mainstream. Trust me. I was reading this book, I was rereading it at my work when we were out on the ocean, and my friends saw me reading it. I showed them the trailer for the movie. They were getting into it. They were getting interested. They wanted to know more about it. The minute I told them about this dude turning himself into a worm, their interest went right out the fucking window. So, and it doesn't matter, guys. Hardcore Dune fans, guess what? It doesn't matter if you're over here like, yeah, but you gotta read it. Like, I know it sounds weird just saying it, but if you read it, it really makes sense. You understand it. Look, that might be true, but it doesn't matter at all if the thing is so weird to the way it sounds to people that they refuse to read it, because then they're never gonna read it and they're never gonna understand. So when you're making stories and shit, you can't make them so weird that they're going to deter people from experiencing them. Let me rephrase that. You can, just don't ever expect your book, your video game, whatever the fuck it is, don't expect it to gain any more than a cult following. If that's all you ever expect, great. But for the most part, Dune is so fucking awesome, except like the Butlerian Jihad, all the way up to Dune. All the books from this, all the way up to this, I think are awesome. The whole story of this fictional universe, from this to this, awesome. Badass. After this, it gets stupid weird. So I would love to see everything from this to this become real popular and real mainstream and have more people get into it and experience how great it is. But that's never going to happen if they push the weird dumb shit, like the dude turning himself into a worm. So yeah, that's just the way that is, and you can be upset about it if you want, but being upset about it doesn't change reality. So that's just the way that is. They made this Dune movie. If they were smart, if it does well and they want to make more stuff from Dune, the smart thing to do would be for them to not go too much farther past Dune, because you're gonna get into some dumb weird shit that's gonna turn people away from it. The smart thing to do would be to go. You made Dune great. Now let's go backwards. Let's do the Butlerian Jihad and let's do all the shit leading up to it, because that's the good shit. A dude turning himself into a giant worm with a human face. That's not the good shit. That's some dumb weird shit. You could probably get away if they wanted to do Dune Messiah, and if they wanted to do it just up to the point where Paul's son Leto becomes emperor, they might be able to get away with that, but they would require some subtle tweaking and adjustments to be made. But you go too much farther past him becoming emperor, and it just gets weird. So yeah, that's my 3 ways how to get into Dune, and that's my thought on the Dune movie and the new trailer. Yeah, you could start with the Butlerian Jihad, which is starting from the chronological very beginning. You could start with the House books, which is not the very, very beginning, but it's kind of like, it's the direct prequels to Dune. It gives you insight into the different houses and how this universe is laid out with its feudal system and its like lords and great houses and families, noble houses, noble families, the Spacing Guild, their monopoly on space travel, the Bene Gesserit cult of, they call them witches, but that's another thing I want to make very clear with people here to Dune. This is science fiction, not fantasy. No one in this, I don't care how much it sounds like they do, no one in Dune has magical powers. No one. Like Paul can predict the future, like to a T. It's not through magic though. He's due to specialized training, genetic breeding, and ingestion of this drug, his mind has evolved to where it is so complex and so advanced, he can calculate the future accurately. But it is not magic. So if you're thinking like there's going to be like space wizards, this is not a Star Wars thing. There's no one casting lightning bolts from their fucking hands, all right? That kind of shit's not going to happen here. Even Star Trek, some people in Star Trek are psychic and they can like read minds and shit. That stuff doesn't happen here. So yeah, be ready for that. This is truly just science fiction. So yeah, that's my take on all of that. Let me know what and then the third way you can get into Dune is just to read Dune. But yeah, that's my take on that, how to get into Dune. Let me know what you guys think. Leave some comments below, get a discussion started. If you liked what you saw here, please hit the like button. Check out some of my other videos, maybe subscribe to my channel. And other than that, I will see you guys next time.